So after the original shortfall for Alan Bates is written off by the Post Office for around of £1,000, we join him again in his testimony at the Post Office Horizon IT inquiry, where there's some back and forth with the new retail line manager saying he can't keep rolling over shortfalls and gains, and tries to quote a contract saying he's got to make good all losses. However, Alan Bates points out the contract says that he only needs to make good losses that are caused due to his own error or negligence or that of his staff, and he'd be happy to make it up if he could get access to the data that will show that that is the cause rather than there being a fault in the Horizon system. Let's jump into the inquiry.
Before you had authorization to write this loss off, you continued to roll it over from week to week.
Yes, I did.
And was that done with the knowledge and approval of your then retail line manager?
Well, they were aware of it. They certainly informed that that's what I was doing. So
we've heard.
And that's a hallmark of a lot of the Subpostmasters cases, isn't it? They keep the post office informed. Now, if people were doing things wrong, you would expect them to try and keep that hidden, not shout about it from the rooftops to the organisation that you would allegedly be wronging.
From some post office staff, the evidence of Susan Harding springs to mind, particularly to me. The post office believed that the suspense account was used by sub-postmasters to cover up theft and fraud. Your evidence is that you were being transparent from an early stage in the life of Horizon in your complaints about Horizon discrepancies, about the use of the suspense account to hold over disputed sums whilst continuing to assert that the money wasn't owed and ought not to be made good. Is that right?
that's correct.
Did there come a time when that practice was challenged?
Not during my tenure. I understand it was later on.
I think after this write-off, there continued to be some shortfalls shown on Horizon. Is that right?
That's right, yes. Well, it's not just, sorry, you say shortages. It was also overs and unders. It was
so surpluses as well.
Surpluses, yeah.
So that has been asked by people before. Did it ever show surpluses? So there's Alan Bates confirming at a very early stage in the rollout of Horizon that there was both shortages and overages reported by Subpostmasters.
And did you seek to discover the cause of both the surpluses and the shortages?
Yes, as much as we could.
And did you encounter success?
On occasion, yes.
Did it remain the case, however, that a sum just over £1,000 was carried as a shortage in the suspense account?
No, not to my recollection. There was a claim at the very end of my contract that I think they said that the office was owing something in the region of £1,200 or £1,400. But
it's that I'm referring to.
Sorry?
It's that I was referring to.
Yeah, no, but that wasn't carried as such. What happened was that I refused to. When we undertook our weekly balance, you were then meant to put in money to make up to the figure or take money out if it was over in there. I refused to do that. I rolled through the shortages or the losses in there. Shortages or the overs each time. So it had a running total. It was adjusted from week to week because I really did not know where the office was up to. You know, I had no idea. So, and often some of these where there had been an error might come back in a week or 2 weeks or something of that sort of time, or it could be a lot longer. When the actual error was discovered elsewhere and it can be corrected. But no, I never actually reset or zeroed the system, but I just kept rolling through the shortages and losses. And Post Office were aware of what I was doing.
And that sounds perfectly reasonable because you're keeping accurate records, aren't you? Whether they're overs or unders. And, if something is going to come back as an error because an error is producing it, then it doesn't make sense for you to sink potentially thousands of pounds into a system to only then have to take it out once the error is received and notified. So that seems like a much more sensible process than maybe the official post office process at the time.
Did the installation of a new retail line manager, Mike Wakely, cause matters to be brought to a head in that respect?
Eventually, yes.
And can we look at that eventually? Poll 404598, page 144, please. This is a letter to you dated the 14th of April 2003. Reference losses and gains. Just want to read the first part of the first paragraph. Further to our conversation, you confirm that you've been rolling over losses and gains for the past 2 years or more. That's what you've just described.
Yes.
He says, I was unaware of this practice. And then in the second paragraph, he says, I'm now instructing you that with immediate effect, you're required to make good the outstanding loss and to cease with this current practice of rolling over any losses and gains. Can we see?
Well, that's quite clear, isn't it? Please be advised that Subpostmasters are responsible for all losses caused through your own negligence, carelessness, or error. Well, if it's not been caused by that, then surely the practice that Alan Bates is employing here is a valid practice.
Your reply, please. Page 145. You say, I'm in receipt of your letter, the 14th of April, that's the one we've just read, confirming our conversation regarding losses and gains at our office, which have always been rolled over since the installation of Horizon. I appreciate you may well have been unaware of this practice at the office, but can assure you that many others at post office, many other post office staff knew of it. My comments regarding this are all well documented in a number of letters, such as that dated the 19th of December, which, like all letters, were sent recorded delivery. The problem with rolling over the losses and gains is that I presume I'd be accepting liability for them, which is something that I've pointed out in writing to you since the introduction of Horizon here. I'm unable to do until such time as I'm able to access the data that I'm being asked to be responsible for. As I've written previously, the totally inadequate report system has been made so complex it lacks the ability to interrogate the system when you know the information is inside. If I'm unable to access the data to check items, it's totally unreasonable to expect me to accept liability from uncheckable data.
And again, that seems perfectly reasonable because in the words of his new retail line manager, it's if the losses are caused by your own negligence or error. And what Alan Bates is asserting here is that is not the case. That's why I've rolled it over.
I think that reply speaks for itself. But did this exchange of correspondence, the new-ish, I think, retail line manager raising the issue, requiring you to make good the shortfall, to cease the practice, ultimately lead to your contract being terminated?
I believe so, yes.
Can we look, please, at page 147 of this bundle? Letter from Mr. Wakely, 2nd of May, scroll down. Thank you for your letter of the 16th of April. That's the one we've just looked at, the contents of which have been noted. Nevertheless, I must point out that you are bound by the terms and conditions of your contract for services, which was acknowledged by you on the 31st of March 2003, and somebody's written in correctly, I think 1998. That was you, was it?
Yes.
1998, exclamation mark. Accepting your appointment. To this effect, you're charged with ensuring that all accounts entrusted to you are kept in the form prescribed by Post Office using the approved accounting system. And therefore, in the event of any losses occurring, these should be made good without delay.
And that's a little bit of a change from the first letter, isn't it? Appreciate that might be the wording copied from the contract, but in the first letter it says you're responsible for things that happen due to your own error and negligence, not in any case. But it does say in this one, obviously, in the event of any losses, which seems unreasonable, particularly when you're not saying, I refuse to do this completely. What you're saying is, I refuse to do it until I see the data that actually shows where this money is or where it's supposedly come from, which seems like a perfectly reasonable stand to take.
Accordingly, failure to comply with these obligations can be construed as a breach of contract, which could ultimately put your contract for services at risk. Over the page, I therefore request that you acknowledge the content of the letter within 10 days of its posting, confirming that the accounts are being maintained in the correct fashion, and make good the losses as per your contractual obligations. And then 149, please, your reply to that letter. With regard to your letter of the 2nd of May, the first paragraph, I think you pick him up on the typo. You refer me to section 12 of the contract, and rather than what he has suggested to you, you're liable to repay all losses, you point out that section 12 in fact states the sub-postmaster is responsible for all losses caused through his own negligence, carelessness or error, and also for losses of all kinds caused by his assistants. Deficiencies due to such losses must be made good without delay. You rightly point out that I've agreed these terms. I confirm I gladly make good any losses caused in these manner, but I can see nothing in this clause which states that I'm also liable for data I'm unable to check. And that's a summary of the position that you had been maintaining, I think, consistently since installation.
Yes.
To take an extreme, if the Horizon system said I owed £1 million, would you say I'd have to make good the loss without delay and without question? There's no way I will agree to be held responsible for data I have input until such time as I'm able to access the data that I'm being asked to be responsible for. In trying to state that I've acknowledged such things as terms and conditions of my contract, you're in effect purporting to vary this contract.
And it makes you wonder whether they actually backed down somewhat in Alan Bates's case, albeit did dismiss him, because, you know, the points he's making are very valid, very carefully considered, and it's true. You know, if Horizon suddenly threw out £1 million, would you expect me to put that in straight away? Well, nobody could do that, I'm sure.
We can skip over the next paragraphs, which are about something else, and then go to the next page, 150, and then the letter ends. So you correct the post office on the terms and conditions. You make it clear the point that many have missed, that the contract does not oblige you to repay all losses. And then you make a point of emphasis, the £1 million example in your third paragraph. Was there any effort by the post office to engage with the points that you were making in this letter?
None at all, never addressed them.